How can people hedge themselves against a weakening dollar? Let's start with a weakening dollar.
We don't really need to help hedge themselves against it, because the best hedge on with a weakening dollar, US equities will probably carry on doing quite well, and you'll probably see other equities like Japanese and European equities do quite well, particularly European equities. So, and in fact, you don't really need to hedge yourself. You just need to be long risk assets at that point if the US dollar is weakening. And if the US dollar is weakening, that's also pretty good news for emerging market assets. You probably don't need to hedge yourself at that point. You just probably stay in that long position. But you may redistribute your assets away from the US.
Right,
That's the crucial distinction. You may go, well, you know what, the US is looking pretty overvalued at the moment, and I'll start buying European equities, which is what has been happening, by the way. That is been the trade. If you have a strengthening dollar, and it's the strengthening dollar is telling you that people are worried, then you do need to think about hedging. And there are probably three mechanisms for hedging, all of which you can use leveraging. The first one is that you'd probably be looking at FX rates, because you'd probably be looking at the cable rate, sterling dollar pair, because you'd be looking at sterling weakening and the dollar strengthening. So that would be classic hedge number one. You won't get a lot of volatility there, because that rate never moves violently. Because you're never going to get the cable rate going from 1.3 to 3 or 2, because it doesn't work that way.
But you could maximise your returns with.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's where leverage plays in. The second way you could probably hedge your portfolio is you'd probably be looking at gold. That's the classic hedge. Now, gold has a slight problem initially. In the first phases, gold has a slight problem with the strengthening US Treasuries, because, of course, people effectively use US Treasuries as their safe harbour asset. And sometimes gold doesn't do terrifically well in that kind of first instalment of the panic. But then, quite often, when that panic begins to become infectious and everybody worries about the global financial system going into meltdown, then actually suddenly gold, reappears on the radar again, and then gold becomes quite attractive at that point. I think the chances of a nasty bump in the middle of the night are increasing exponentially over the next 2 years, and gold's been fairly steady actually. It's held within the 120, 1250, 1350 trading range. A lot of physical sellers of gold, but a lot of kind of paper and options buyers of gold, so they sort of balance it out. And gold could suddenly come back into favour. And of course, the third thing is you just go back, just go short. Equities. I mean, risk assets are going to do rather badly at that point. And basically, you just go short any risk asset you can get your hands on. I would suggest that the probably at that point the riskiest assets are sitting in America, because they're quite highly valued. Valuations are quite high on US equities. And you pick an index like the S&P 500, and you say, well, I'll go net short that, and I'll look at kind of hedging out my portfolio. So, and the last option, you just go cash. Cash is always a quite good hedge in a kind of slowdown, because you can keep your powder dry and use that money later on to buy assets that are much cheaper than they are today because they've gone down in price. So cash is a natural harbour, and I suppose also, as I said, people buy US Treasuries. You'd go long US Treasuries at that point, because if you're getting 3.5%, your price cap, 3.5%, 4%, that's a nice yield to have, as long as US Treasury capital prices don't fall radically.
I just have one last question on gold, very quickly.
Yeah.
If there are physical sellers,
there are lots of them.
Does that not indicate that people are not expecting anything bad?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very interesting. I saw two kind of indicators on this. First indicator is that I've picked up recently that India, which is traditionally a big buyer of physical gold, has been net short for a long time. There's a separate factor going on there. That's all to do with the government's reforms and demonetisation. So the government under Prime Minister Modi has basically brought in this new regime, which effectively encourages people to move into formal economy. And what that's actually meant is that people have been selling gold and sticking their money in the bank account in very direct ways, because the bank accounts are more reliable than they used to be. So there's been more physical selling of gold in India, China less so, but India certainly. And the other one, which I saw, is an outfit called Bullion Vault, which is kind of investment gold website, and you can buy gold and it stores it in there. And they've been noticing over the last couple of months that there have been net sellers on their system. And yes, you're right, that's usually a negative sign. But the only thing I'd say is that they might that negative features might be through independent factors. So India is a classic example. They might be net selling because they're having they're reforming their economy and they just putting their money in cash. It didn't tell you anything about gold. Yeah. Even with bullion volume, it could just simply be that lots of people bought gold when it was much cheaper, and now they're taking profits. You should be careful about using signals as a kind of like, oh my God, that's telling us that gold's overvalued. It just could tell you that people have made lots of money and they're selling it. I'm not particularly bullish on the price of gold over the next few months. Right. But I would be more bullish on the price of gold if we felt there was a genuine systemic threat and that we're about to slip into a really nasty slowdown, and the central banks have no weapons left to fight that slowdown. At that point, gold becomes more interesting.
So buy now.
Arguably, the argument is the contrarian would be out there buying now. Exactly, the contrarian would be saying, actually, gold's found a support level. Yeah, it's probably not going to go a lot below that. And that if we have a real threat of a global financial crisis, and we really should not underestimate that there's a chance of that over the next couple of years. Your debt levels have gone up. The central banks don't have, with the exception of the Americans, many weapons to fight now, except for things like helicopter money. If there's a slowdown, they could be in trouble. And at that point, all the fears about the global financial crisis come creeping back out again, and people really start to worry and panic. And at that point, gold is very, very, very useful at that point as a hedge. I don't think that's likely at the moment, and I don't think that's necessarily probable over the next few years, but it's not impossible.